This is where you lost 25 years. In 25 minutes.
The anniversary dinner reservation was for 7:30. At 9:15, I was still sitting alone at our kitchen table, staring at the cold lasagna I'd made from scratch, when my phone finally rang. "Mr. Thompson? This is Officer Martinez with the county police. We found your wife at the Sunset Motel on Route 9. She's been taken to County General Hospital. You need to come immediately." My fork clattered against the plate. 25 years of marriage. And this is how our silver anniversary ends, with a cop calling to tell me my wife Sarah was found half dead in some sleazy roadside motel. "Is she... What happened?" I managed to ask, though deep down I already knew. The late nights at the law firm, the mysterious phone calls, the way she'd started dressing like she was 25 again instead of 45. "Sir, we can't discuss details over the phone. Please come to the hospital as soon as possible." I grabbed my keys, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and something that might have been relief. After months of suspicion, of feeling like I was losing my mind every time she claimed to be working late or meeting clients, I finally had my answer. The drive to County General took 20 minutes through the rain-soaked streets of our mid-sized Ohio town. 20 minutes to process that my marriage was officially over, that my wife had been screwing around behind my back while I played the faithful husband, making anniversary dinners for one. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and desperation. A tired-looking nurse led me through a maze of curtained beds to where Sarah lay unconscious, her perfectly styled blonde hair matted with sweat, her expensive business suit wrinkled and stained. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. "The police found her around 8 o'clock, the nurse explained in a professional monotone. She was alone, disoriented, showing signs of alcohol poisoning. Her phone was buzzing constantly when they brought her in. I picked up Sarah's phone from the bedside table. 17 missed calls from Nolan, and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. "Baby, where are you? The cops came by. I had to leave. Don't say anything about us. I'll call you tomorrow." Nolan. I should have known. Nolan Garrett, the smarmy tech consultant who'd been sniffing around Sarah's law firm for the past 6 months, supposedly helping them modernize their digital infrastructure. 38 years old, drove a BMW and thought his $500 haircut made him irresistible to married women. "Sir?" The nurse was looking at me with concern. "Are you all right?" I realized I'd been standing there for several minutes, just staring at the evidence of my wife's betrayal glowing on her phone screen. "Yeah, I'm fine. When will she wake up?" "Hard to say. Could be a few hours, could be tomorrow morning. The doctor will want to keep her for observation." I nodded and pulled up a chair beside Sarah's bed, not because I wanted to be there when she woke up, but because I needed time to think. 25 years of marriage doesn't just end without consequences. We had 2 daughters, Chloe, 22 and finishing her senior year at Ohio State, and Riley, 19 and in her sophomore year at Miami University. We had a house, joint bank accounts, retirement funds, a life built together. And we had friends, or rather, we'd had friends. People who would take sides, who would judge, who would whisper about us at dinner parties and school events. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Another text from Nolan. "Hospital parking lot, black BMW. Come out when you can." I looked out the window and sure enough, there was a black BMW idling in the far corner of the parking lot. The audacity of this guy was breathtaking. His married lover was lying unconscious in the ER, and he was sitting outside like some teenage Romeo, waiting for his girlfriend to sneak out of her parents' house. Something cold and calculating settled in my chest. For months, I'd been the victim in this scenario. The clueless husband, the last to know, the object of pity. But sitting there in that sterile hospital room, watching my wife's phone light up with messages from her lover, I realized I was done being the victim. I slipped Sarah's phone into my pocket and walked out of the hospital. The rain had stopped, leaving the parking lot slick and gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Nolan's BMW was exactly where I expected it to be, engine running, windows tinted dark enough that I couldn't see inside. I walked over and tapped on the driver's side window. The window rolled down, revealing Nolan's perfectly sculpted face, his expression shifting from hope to confusion to something approaching fear when he realized who I was. "Oh. Hi, Dave. I heard about Sarah and wanted to make sure she was okay." "How considerate of you," I said, my voice remarkably steady. especially since you were the one who left her alone in that motel room. Nolan's face flushed red. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out Sarah's phone and read his last text message aloud. Hospital parking lot, black BMW. Come out when you can. Then I looked back at him. Still don't know what I'm talking about? For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Nolan tried to roll up his window, but I grabbed the edge of it, holding it down. We need to have a conversation, Nolan. Not here, not now, but soon. Because this thing between you and my wife, it ends tonight. And the way it ends depends entirely on how smart you are about what comes next. I let go of the window and stepped back. Nolan slammed the gas pedal and peeled out of the parking lot, his tires squealing against the wet asphalt. I stood there for a moment, feeling something I hadn't felt in months: control. I didn't go back to the hospital that night. Instead, I drove home to our empty house in Maple Ridge, the subdivision where we'd lived for the past 15 years, where we'd hosted barbecues and birthday parties and pretended to be the perfect American family. The house felt different now, like a stage set after the play has ended. I walked through the rooms, seeing everything with new eyes. The family photos on the mantle, the expensive furniture Sarah had insisted on buying, the kitchen where I'd spent the evening cooking a romantic dinner for a wife who was busy screwing another man in a cheap motel. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat down at my computer. If Sarah thought she could humiliate me and walk away unscathed, she was about to learn otherwise. But I needed to be smart about this. Emotional reactions lead to mistakes, and I couldn't afford any mistakes. First, I changed all the passwords on our joint accounts and transferred half of our savings into a new account in my name only. Perfectly legal. It was my money too, after all. Then I called our credit card companies and reported Sarah's cards as potentially compromised, requesting new cards be sent to my office address only. By 3 in the morning, I had a complete picture of Sarah's betrayal, laid out in spreadsheets and printed bank statements, the expensive dinners charged to our joint credit card, the hotel rooms booked on our shared travel rewards account, the jewelry purchases that I'd never seen her wear at home. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley. Dad, Mom's in the hospital. Chloe called me crying. What happened? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Your mother had an accident. She'll be fine. We'll talk tomorrow. It wasn't a lie, exactly. Sarah had definitely had an accident. She'd accidentally gotten caught. The next morning, I drove to the hospital with a fresh change of clothes for Sarah and a carefully rehearsed speech. I found her awake, looking pale and fragile, talking quietly with a police officer who was taking notes on a small pad. Don't remember much after dinner, Sarah was saying. I must have had more wine than I realized. The officer looked up when I approached. Mr. Thompson, I'm Detective Williams. I was just getting your wife's statement about last night. Of course, I said, setting the clothes bag on the chair. Anything I can do to help? Sarah's eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of panic there. She was wondering how much I knew, how much I'd figured out. Actually, Detective Williams continued, we're trying to identify a man who was seen leaving the motel around the time your wife was found. Tall, dark hair, driving a black BMW. Your wife says she doesn't remember anyone else being there, but the desk clerk is pretty sure she checked in with someone. I felt Sarah's eyes boring into me, silently pleading. After 25 years of marriage, I could read her expressions like a book. She was terrified I was about to destroy her life in front of this cop. I'm sorry, Detective, I said. I wouldn't know anything about that. Sarah told me she was working late at the firm. I was home all evening. The relief on Sarah's face was almost comical. She thought I was protecting her, that we were going to sweep this whole thing under the rug and go back to pretending we had a happy marriage. She had no idea what was coming. After the detective left, Sarah tried to take my hand. Dave, I know how this looks, but I can explain everything. I was meeting a client, and things got out of hand. I never meant for any of this to happen. A client named Nolan? I asked quietly. Her face went white. How did you... Your phone. 17 missed calls and a dozen text messages. Very touching, really, especially the one where he told you not to say anything about your relationship. Sarah closed her eyes. Dave, please. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can... No, I said, standing up. We can't. Because this wasn't a mistake, Sarah. This was a choice, a series of choices, and now I get to make some choices of my own. I left her there in that hospital bed and drove straight to the office of Patricia Chen, the best divorce attorney in town. Ironically, I'd gotten her name from Sarah herself, who'd mentioned Patricia as one of her toughest opponents in court. Patricia was a small, sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who listened to my story without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "How long do you think this affair has been going on?" she asked when I finished. "Based on the credit card statements? At least 4 months, maybe longer? And you have documentation of the financial expenditures?" I slid a folder across her desk. "Everything. Hotel rooms, dinners, jewelry, even a weekend trip to Chicago that she told me was a legal conference." Patricia flipped through the papers, nodding approvingly. "This is very thorough, Mr. Thompson. In Ohio, we have no-fault divorce, so the adultery itself won't affect the property division. But this level of financial deception, this could definitely work in your favor." "What about our daughters?" "They're both over 18, so custody isn't an issue. But I should warn you, divorce can get ugly, especially when there's been infidelity. Your wife will likely try to turn your daughters against you, make you out to be the bad guy somehow." I thought about Chloe and Riley, both of whom had always been closer to their mother. Sarah was the fun parent, the one who took them shopping and planned elaborate vacations. I was the one who enforced curfews and worried about credit card bills. "Let her try," I said. "I'm done protecting her reputation." That afternoon, I went back to the hospital to pick up Sarah. She'd been discharged with instructions to follow up with her primary care doctor and avoid alcohol for the next few weeks. The ride home was silent except for the radio playing softly in the background. "Dave," Sarah finally said as we pulled into our driveway, "I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but please, can we talk about this before you do anything drastic? Think about the girls. Think about our life together." I turned off the engine and looked at her. She was still beautiful at 45, still the woman I'd fallen in love with in law school, but something fundamental had broken between us, something that couldn't be fixed with apologies and promises. "You're right," I said. "We should talk, but not here. Too many memories. How about we meet tomorrow night, somewhere neutral?" Hope flickered in her eyes. "Okay, where?" "The Sunset Motel," I said. "Room 237. I thought it might be appropriate." The hope died instantly, replaced by something that looked like fear. "Dave, please don't do this. Don't be cruel." I got out of the car and walked around to open her door, ever the gentleman. Cruel would be pretending this never happened. Cruel would be letting you think you can lie to me for months and then make it all go away with a few tears and excuses. "I'll see you tomorrow at 8. The next morning, I got a call from my best friend Rick Martinez, a former cop who now owned a small auto repair shop on the east side of town. Rick and I had been friends since high school, the kind of friendship that survives marriages, divorces, career changes, and all the other upheavals that destroy lesser bonds. "Heard about Sarah," he said without preamble. "You okay? How did you—" "My cousin works dispatch. Word is she was found at the Sunset Motel with someone who ran off before the cops got there." "That true?" I sighed. "In a town of 50,000 people, secrets don't stay secret for long." "Yeah, it's true. You need anything? Someone to talk to? Someone to help you move bodies?" Despite everything, I found myself laughing. "Thanks, but I think I can handle this without committing any felonies." "Your call, but if you change your mind, I know a guy who knows a guy." Rick was joking probably, but his offer reminded me of something important. I wasn't alone in this. Sarah might have our mutual friends from the law community, the couples we'd socialized with at dinner parties and charity events. But I had my own allies, guys like Rick, who'd seen enough of life's ugliness to understand that sometimes good people get pushed too far. That afternoon, I drove over to Rick's shop. He was under the hood of a 1967 Mustang, cursing creatively at a stubborn carburetor. Rick was a big guy, 6'2", with graying hair and arms covered in tattoos from his army days. He'd been divorced twice and had no illusions about the sanctity of marriage. "So what's the plan?" he asked, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. "You filing papers?" "Already did. But that's just the legal stuff. I want her to understand what she's done, what she's thrown away." Rick nodded. "And the boyfriend?" "Nolan Garrett. Drives a black BMW, works in tech consulting. Thinks he's God's gift to middle-aged housewives." "Want me to have a conversation with him?" The offer was tempting, but I shook my head. "Thanks, but this is my fight. Besides, beating him up would just make him the victim and me the bad guy. I need to be smarter than that." "Fair enough, but if you need backup, you know where to find me." I left Rick's shop feeling better than I had in months. It's amazing how much strength you can draw from knowing that someone has your back, no questions asked. That evening, I arrived at the Sunset Motel 15 minutes early. It was exactly as sleazy as I'd expected. A two-story strip of rooms painted an unfortunate shade of pink, with a neon sign that flickered intermittently and a parking lot full of potholes. The kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask too many questions. I'd reserved the same room where Sarah had been found, though I'd had to slip the desk clerk an extra 20 to get the information. Room 237, second floor, overlooking the dumpster. Sarah's car pulled into the parking lot at exactly 8 o'clock. She'd always been punctual, even for her own humiliation. She climbed the stairs slowly, like a condemned prisoner walking to the gallows. I opened the door before she could knock. "Hello, Sarah." She looked around the dingy room with obvious distaste. The carpet was stained. The bedspread was a hideous floral pattern that had probably been ugly, even when it was new, and the whole place smelled like cigarettes and industrial-strength disinfectant. "This is where you brought him," I said. "This is where you threw away 25 years of marriage. I wanted you to see it again, to really look at it." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Dave, please. I know I hurt you, but this isn't going to make anything better." "You're right, nothing's going to make this better, but it might help me understand. So tell me, Sarah, was it worth it? Was screwing Nolan Garrett in this dump worth destroying our family?" "It wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. It started as harmless flirting, and then it became something more. And before you knew it, you were charging hotel rooms to our joint credit card and lying to my face every night for 4 months. I pulled out a folder and spread its contents across the room's small table. Bank statements, credit card bills, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, a complete financial record of her affair. "Look at this," I said. "Really look at it. March 15th, dinner at Romano's, $237. That was the night you told me you were working late on the Henderson case. March 22nd, Hilton downtown, one night, $312. You said you had to stay in the city because of a client emergency." Sarah sank into the room's single chair, her face buried in her hands. "Stop. Please stop." April 3rd, jewelry store, $846. "I never saw you wear any new jewelry, Sarah. What did you do with it? Give it to him?" "I threw it away," she sobbed. "After the first time I felt so guilty, I threw it in the river. But you didn't stop. You kept seeing him, kept lying to me, kept spending our money on your affair. Why?" Sarah looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. "Because I felt alive again. Because for the first time in years, someone made me feel young and beautiful and desired. Because our marriage had become so routine, so predictable that I felt like I was disappearing." Her words hit me like a physical blow, because underneath the anger and betrayal, I recognized the truth in what she was saying. We had become routine. We had stopped seeing each other, stopped trying to impress each other, stopped being lovers, and become just roommates who shared a mortgage and a pair of daughters. "So this is my fault?" I asked. "I'm the reason you cheated?" "No," Sarah said quickly. "The cheating is on me. I made that choice. But Dave, we both stopped trying. We both let our marriage become something we just endured, instead of something we enjoyed." I sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly feeling very tired. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we both screwed up. But Sarah, when I realized our marriage was in trouble, I thought about counseling. I thought about planning a romantic getaway, or buying you flowers, or finding ways to reconnect. I didn't think about cheating on you." "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." We sat in silence for several minutes. Two people who had once loved each other enough to promise forever, now sitting in a cheap motel room surveying the wreckage of our life together. "What happens now?" Sarah asked finally. "Now we get divorced," I said. "We sell the house, split the assets, and try to figure out how to co-parent two adult daughters who are going to hate both of us for destroying their family. It doesn't have to be like this. We could try counseling. No," I said firmly. "It's too late for that. The trust is gone, Sarah. Even if I could forgive the cheating, I'll never be able to forget it. Every time you're 5 minutes late, every time your phone buzzes, every time you smile at another man, I'll wonder if it's happening again." Sarah nodded, accepting the inevitable. "What about our friends? What do we tell people?" "We tell them the truth, that our marriage is over and we're handling it as maturely as possible for the sake of our daughters." "And Nolan?" I looked at her sharply. "What about him? Are you going to do anything to him?" I considered the question. Part of me wanted to destroy Nolan Garrett, to make him pay for his role in wrecking my marriage. But another part of me recognized that Nolan was just a symptom, not the disease. Sarah had chosen to cheat. He'd just been available when she made that choice. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But Sarah, if you're smart, you'll end things with him. Because whatever you think you have together, it was built on lies and betrayal. That's not a foundation for anything lasting. We left the motel separately, Sarah first, and then me a few minutes later. As I drove home through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. The worst conversation of my marriage was over, and we'd both survived it. But I should have known that the worst was yet to come. The news of our separation spread through our social circle like wildfire. By the end of the week, I'd received a dozen phone calls, twice as many text messages, and enough casseroles from well-meaning neighbors to feed a small army. The reactions fell into predictable categories. The women, mostly Sarah's friends from her book club and yoga classes, offered carefully neutral support tinged with obvious suspicion that I must have done something to drive her to cheat. The men were more direct in their sympathy, though I could see the fear in their eyes. If it could happen to Dave Thompson, the solid, reliable guy who never caused trouble, it could happen to anyone. But it was the call from Jennifer Walsh that really caught me off guard. Jennifer and her husband Mark had been our closest friends for over a decade. We'd vacationed together, celebrated holidays together, been each other's emergency contacts and confidants. Jennifer was Sarah's maid of honor when we renewed our vows for our 20th anniversary, and Mark was my golf partner and the guy I called when I needed help moving furniture or wanted someone to complain to about the Bengals' latest disappointing season. "Dave," Jennifer said when I answered the phone, "Mark and I heard about you and Sarah. We're so sorry." "Thanks, Jen. It's been a rough couple of weeks, but we're managing." "Listen, I know this is awkward, but we're having our annual 4th of July barbecue next weekend, and we weren't sure. We didn't know if you and Sarah would both want to come, or if that would be uncomfortable." I understood immediately. Jennifer and Mark were trying to figure out how to maintain friendships with both halves of a divorced couple, a social puzzle that had no good solutions. "Don't worry about it," I said. "Sarah and I are both adults. We can handle being at the same party." "Are you sure? Because we could always do separate events, or—" "Jen, it's fine. Really, we'll be civil." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. The Walsh barbecue was a neighborhood institution, an annual gathering of 30 or 40 people from our social circle. Lawyers and doctors, small business owners, and middle managers. The kind of upper-middle-class professionals who formed the backbone of suburban communities across America. I arrived at 6:30, fashionably late, but not so late as to make an entrance. Mark greeted me at the door with a beer and a slightly awkward hug. "Good to see you, buddy. How are you holding up?" "One day at a time," I said, which had become my standard response to that question. The party was in full swing, with people clustered around the pool, the bar, and the elaborate outdoor kitchen where Mark was grilling enough meat to feed a small town. I made the rounds, accepting condolences and deflecting questions about the divorce with practiced ease. Sarah arrived 20 minutes later, and I felt the party's energy shift subtly. Conversations became a little quieter, glances a little more pointed. She looked beautiful, as always, in a blue sundress that I'd bought her for her birthday 2 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. For the first hour, we managed to avoid each other, circulating in different orbits around the party. But in a gathering of 40 people in a suburban backyard, collision was inevitable. It happened at the bar, where I was getting my 3rd beer of the evening. Sarah approached from the other side, reaching for a glass of wine, and suddenly, we were face to face for the first time since the motel. "Hello, Dave." "Sarah." The conversation around us died as people strained to hear what we'd say to each other. I could feel the weight of their expectations, their curiosity about how the recently separated couple would handle this moment. "You look good," Sarah said, and I could tell she was trying to keep things light, normal. "Thanks. So do you." We might have left it at that, two civilized adults making polite small talk, but then I saw him. Nolan Garrett was standing by the pool talking to Jennifer Walsh and looking completely at ease, as if he belonged there. Sarah followed my gaze and her face went pale. "Dave, I didn't know he was going to be here. Jennifer mentioned that her firm was working with some tech consultants, but I never thought—" "You didn't think what? That your boyfriend would show up at our friend's party?" My voice was louder than I'd intended, and several people turned to look at us. Sarah's face flushed red. He's not my boyfriend. We ended things after that night. Did you? Because he looks pretty comfortable for someone who's been dumped. I started walking toward the pool and Sarah grabbed my arm. Dave, please don't make a scene. Not here. Not in front of everyone. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. A scene? Sarah, you brought your lover to our friend's party. The scene's already been made. I shook off her hand and continued toward the pool. Nolan saw me coming and his expression shifted from casual confidence to something approaching panic. He said something to Jennifer and started to move away, but I intercepted him. Nolan, what a surprise to see you here. Dave, hi, Jennifer's firm hired my company to upgrade their network security and she invited me to what? Meet the neighbors? Scope out the local talent? See if there are any other married women you can seduce? The conversations around the pool stopped entirely now. Everyone was staring at us and I could see Mark Walsh pushing through the crowd, clearly intending to intervene before things got out of hand. Look, Dave, I know you're upset and you have every right to be, but maybe we could talk about this privately. Privately? I laughed, a harsh sound that carried across the suddenly quiet backyard. Like you and my wife talked privately in that motel room? Like you privately decided to destroy my marriage? It wasn't like that, Nolan said, his voice getting defensive. Sarah and we have a connection. We care about each other. It's not just some cheap affair. The words hit me like a slap. Bad enough that he'd slept with my wife, but to stand there and claim it was some grand romance made it infinitely worse. A connection, I repeated. Is that what you call it when you screw another man's wife and then leave her unconscious in a motel room for the cops to find? I didn't leave her unconscious. She was fine when Nolan stopped, realizing he'd just admitted to being there. Mark Walsh finally reached us, placing a hand on my shoulder. Hey guys, maybe we should take this inside. Talk it through. I shrugged off Mark's hand, keeping my eyes on Nolan. No, Mark, I think everyone here should know exactly what kind of man your new business partner is. The kind who preys on married women, who sneaks around behind husbands' backs, who runs away when things get complicated. Dave, that's enough, Sarah said, appearing at my elbow. You're drunk and you're embarrassing yourself. I turned to look at her. This woman I'd loved for half my life, who was now defending her lover in front of all our friends. I'm embarrassing myself? Sarah, you cheated on your husband with a man who's young enough to be your son, got so drunk you nearly died, and I'm the one embarrassing myself. The crowd around us had grown larger, and I could see people pulling out their phones, probably recording the whole thing for social media. In the morning, this would be all over Facebook, the local gossip forums, maybe even the newspaper's police blotter, but I was past caring about appearances. You want to know what's embarrassing? I continued, my voice carrying across the backyard. What's embarrassing is spending 25 years building a life with someone only to find out she's been charging her affair to your joint credit card. What's embarrassing is having to hear from a cop that your wife was found without clothes in a cheap motel. What's embarrassing is having your marriage become the subject of gossip at neighborhood barbecues. Dave, stop! Jennifer Walsh pleaded. Please just stop. But I couldn't stop. Months of humiliation and anger were pouring out of me, and I didn't want to stop them. And you, I said, turning back to Nolan, you think you won something here? You think you're some kind of stud for seducing a middle-aged housewife? Let me tell you what you actually won. You won a woman who lies to the people she supposedly loves. You won someone who'll cheat on her husband of 25 years. Congratulations, Nolan. When she gets bored with you, and she will, remember that you knew exactly what kind of person she was before you got involved. Nolan's face was red now, his earlier panic replaced by anger. You know what, Dave? Maybe if you'd been a better husband, Sarah wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere for attention. Maybe if you'd made her feel appreciated instead of taking her for granted. He never got to finish the sentence. My fist connected with his jaw with a satisfying crack, and he went down hard, landing in the pool with a splash that sent water cascading over the horrified party guests. The backyard erupted in chaos. Women screamed, men shouted, and Mark Walsh was suddenly between me and the pool, his hands on my chest, pushing me back. That's enough! Dave, you need to leave, now! I looked around at the faces surrounding me. Some were shocked, some were angry, some were secretly pleased at the entertainment, but none of them were friendly. In the space of 5 minutes, I'd gone from being the wronged husband deserving of sympathy to being the crazy guy who'd assaulted someone at a neighborhood barbecue. Sarah was helping Nolan out of the pool, her sundress soaked, her carefully styled hair dripping. She looked at me with something that might have been hatred. "Are you happy now?" she asked. "Is this what you wanted?" I looked at her, at Nolan, at the crowd of people who'd been our friends and neighbors for over a decade. "Yeah," I said. "Actually, it is." I walked out of the backyard, through the Walsh house and out to my car. As I drove away, I could see people clustered around the pool, probably calling the police, definitely calling their other friends to spread the news of the night's drama. My phone started ringing before I got home, but I didn't answer it. I had some planning to do. The fallout from the barbecue was swift and predictable. By Monday morning, I'd received calls from 3 different lawyers, 2 police officers, and 1 very angry daughter. "Dad, what the heck were you thinking?" Chloe's voice was shrill with outrage. "Mom called me crying, saying you attacked her boyfriend at a party. She's talking about getting a restraining order." "He's not her boyfriend," I said calmly. "He's the man she was cheating with, and I didn't attack him. I hit him once. You punched him into a swimming pool. The pool was just good luck. I was aiming for his face. This isn't funny, Dad. Mom says you've been harassing her, stalking her, trying to destroy her reputation. She says you're having some kind of breakdown." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, looking out at the backyard where Sarah had planted roses the year we moved in. "Chloe, has your mother told you why we're getting divorced?" There was a pause. "She said you 2 grew apart, that you couldn't work through your differences." "Did she mention that she's been having an affair for the past 4 months? That she was found unconscious in a motel room with another man? That she's been spending our money on hotel rooms and expensive dinners while lying to my face every night?" Another pause, longer this time. She said there was someone else, but that it didn't mean anything. That it was just a mistake. A 4-month mistake that she charged to our credit cards. A mistake she was planning to continue until she got caught. I could hear Chloe crying on the other end of the line. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did I have to hear about the affair from Mom and the fight from her friends on Facebook?" "Because I was trying to protect you and Riley from the ugly details. I thought we could handle this like adults, keep our problems private. But your mother had other ideas." The truth was more complicated than that. I'd been protecting Sarah's reputation as much as our daughter's feelings, operating under the old-fashioned notion that a man doesn't air his dirty laundry in public. But Sarah had been using that protection against me, painting me as the unreasonable party while positioning herself as the victim of a failing marriage. "Dad, you can't go around hitting people. You could have been arrested." "You're right. It was stupid and impulsive, and I regret it. But Chloe, I'm not going to apologize for being angry. Your mother didn't just cheat on me. She humiliated me, lied to me, and then brought her lover to a party with all our friends. There's only so much a man can take." After I hung up with Chloe, I called Patricia Chen to discuss the legal implications of my poolside assault on Nolan Garrett. "The good news is that he's not pressing charges," Patricia said. "Apparently, his lawyer advised him that a public court case would draw attention to his affair with a married woman, which wouldn't be good for his business reputation. And the bad news? Sarah's lawyer is using the incident to paint you as unstable and potentially violent. They're pushing for a restraining order and asking for a larger share of the marital assets as compensation for emotional distress." I laughed bitterly. Emotional distress? She's claiming emotional distress. It's a common tactic in contentious divorces. The unfaithful spouse tries to flip the narrative, make themselves the victim. Don't worry, we have plenty of evidence of her financial misconduct to counter their claims, but I was tired of playing defense. For months, I'd been reacting to Sarah's choices, trying to minimize damage and protect everyone's feelings. It was time to go on the offense. That afternoon, I drove to the offices of Garrett Tech Solutions, the consulting firm where Nolan worked. It was located in a gleaming office building downtown, the kind of place that screamed, "We charge too much for simple services." The receptionist was a young woman with purple hair and enough facial piercings to set off a metal detector. "Can I help you?" "I'd like to speak with whoever's in charge of human resources." "That would be Mrs. Patterson. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think she'll want to hear what I have to say. Tell her it's about Nolan Garrett and professional conduct." 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Linda Patterson, a stern-looking woman in her 50s who reminded me of my high school principal. I explained the situation in clinical terms, focusing on the professional implications of Nolan's behavior. He was conducting a personal relationship with a client, I concluded. A relationship that involved alcohol, resulted in a police incident, and has now become public knowledge in the legal community. I thought you should be aware of the potential liability issues. Mrs. Patterson took notes throughout my presentation, asking pointed questions about dates, locations, and witnesses. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Mr. Thompson, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. We take professional conduct very seriously, and if Mr. Garrett has been involved in inappropriate relationships with clients, we need to investigate immediately. I'm not looking to get anyone fired, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. I just think his supervisor should know what kind of situations he's creating. Of course, we'll handle this internally. As I left the building, I felt a grim satisfaction. Nolan might not face criminal charges for his role in destroying my marriage, but he was about to discover that actions have consequences in the professional world as well. My next stop was the law firm where Sarah worked. Brennan, Walsh & Associates was one of the most prestigious firms in the city, the kind of place that valued reputation above all else. Sarah had worked there for 8 years, building a solid practice in family law with dreams of making partner within the next few years. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in my car across the street and made a phone call to Thomas Brennan, the firm's founding partner. Tom, it's Dave Thompson, Sarah's husband. Dave, good to hear from you. I heard about you and Sarah separating. I'm sorry things didn't work out. Thanks, Tom. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I wanted to give you a heads up about something that might affect the firm. I explained the situation carefully, emphasizing the potential for negative publicity and client concerns about Sarah's judgment. I mentioned the police report from the motel incident, the public scene at the barbecue, and the possibility that opposing counsel might use Sarah's personal conduct to undermine her credibility in court. Jesus, Dave, I had no idea it was that serious. Sarah said you two were having some difficulties, but she never mentioned any of this. I'm not trying to hurt her career, Tom, but I thought you should know what you might be dealing with. The last thing the firm needs is to have this kind of drama affecting client relationships. After I hung up, I sat in the car for a few minutes, watching lawyers and paralegals coming and going from the building where Sarah had worked so hard to build her career. I felt a moment of regret, not for what I'd done, but for what we'd both lost. 25 years ago, we'd been young and in love and full of plans for the future. Now we were middle-aged and bitter and using our intimate knowledge of each other as tools, but the regret passed quickly. Sarah had made her choices, and now she could live with the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Rick Martinez. Heard you took a swim at the Walsh barbecue. You okay? I typed back. I'm fine. Nolan's the one who went swimming. Beer tonight? I'm buying. Rain check. I've got one more stop to make. The last item on my agenda was the most important and the most dangerous. I drove to Nolan's apartment complex, an upscale development on the north side of town where young professionals paid premium rents for granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. I didn't go to his apartment. Instead, I waited in the parking lot until I saw his black BMW pull in. He parked in his assigned space and got out, moving carefully. His jaw was swollen and discolored from our encounter at the pool, and he kept looking around nervously, as if he expected me to jump out from behind a parked car. I got out of my truck and walked over to him. He saw me coming and froze, his keys halfway to the building's entrance. Relax, Nolan, I'm not here to hit you again. What do you want? His voice was wary and he kept his distance. I want to give you some advice, man to man. I don't need advice from you. Yeah, you do. See, you think this is over. You think you can go back to your life, maybe find another bored housewife to seduce, maybe even keep seeing Sarah once the divorce is final. But you're wrong. Nolan's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. Do you know what I did today, Nolan? I had a conversation with your boss about professional conduct. I had a chat with Sarah's boss about potential reputation issues. I've been very busy making sure that everyone who matters knows exactly what kind of people you both are. The color drained from Nolan's face. You can't do that. That's harassment. No, that's consequences. You see, you thought you could screw around with my wife without any real cost to yourself. You figured the worst that could happen was an angry husband, and you could handle that. But you forgot something important. What? I stepped closer, close enough that he had to crane his neck to look up at me. You forgot that I'm not just Sarah's husband. I'm a member of this community. I have friends, business relationships, a reputation of my own. And when someone hurts me, hurts my family, I have the ability to hurt them back. You're insane. No, I'm thorough, and I'm patient. See, you're going to discover over the next few weeks that your life has become very complicated. Your job, your social standing, your future prospects, they're all going to be affected by your decision to get involved with my wife. And every time something goes wrong for you, every time a door closes or an opportunity disappears, you're going to remember this conversation. I turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at him. Oh, and Nolan? If I ever see you with my wife again, if you so much as send her a text message or like one of her Facebook posts, I'll make what happened at the barbecue look like a friendly handshake. Are we clear? He nodded, unable to speak. I drove home feeling better than I had in weeks. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was in control of my own life. Sarah and Nolan had made their choices, and now they were going to live with the consequences. But I should have known that Sarah wouldn't go down without a fight. The restraining order was delivered to my house on a Tuesday morning by a sheriff's deputy who looked embarrassed to be there. The document was a masterpiece of legal fiction, painting me as an unstable, potentially violent man who had been stalking and harassing my estranged wife and her friend. According to Sarah's sworn statement, I had been following her, making threatening phone calls, vandalizing her property, and creating a climate of fear and intimidation. The incident at the barbecue was described as an unprovoked assault that left her fearing for her safety and the safety of other innocent parties. I called Patricia Chen immediately. It's a tactical move, she explained. Sarah's lawyer is trying to control the narrative, make you look like the aggressor so they can ask for a bigger settlement. The good news is that most of these allegations are either false or exaggerated. We can fight this. How long will that take? A few weeks, maybe a month. In the meantime, you need to stay away from Sarah. No contact, no communication through third parties, no social media interactions. Don't give them any ammunition. But staying away from Sarah proved to be more difficult than I'd anticipated, because Sarah wasn't staying away from our daughters. Over the next week, I received increasingly hostile phone calls from both Chloe and Riley, who had been thoroughly briefed on their father's alleged crimes. Mom showed us the restraining order, Riley said during one particularly painful conversation. Dad, she's scared of you. She's staying at Aunt Linda's house because she's afraid you'll hurt her. Riley, I would never hurt your mother. You know that. I thought I knew that. But Mom says you've been following her, calling her work, trying to get her fired. She says you're not the man she married. Your mother is right about that last part. I'm not the man she married. That man was naive enough to trust his wife, stupid enough to believe her lies, and weak enough to let her walk all over him. But I would never, ever hurt her, physically. Then why did you hit her boyfriend? I sighed. Because I lost my temper. Because I'm human, and I reached my breaking point. It was wrong, and I regret it. But Riley, your mother destroyed our marriage. She lied to me for months, spent our money on another man, and then tried to make me look like the bad guy when she got caught. She made a mistake, Dad. People make mistakes. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. A mistake is bouncing a check or missing an appointment. What your mother did was a series of deliberate choices that she made over the course of 4 months. She chose to lie, she chose to cheat, and she chose to betray our family. But I could hear in Riley's voice that Sarah's version of events was winning. I was losing my daughters along with my wife, and there didn't seem to be anything I could do about it. The professional consequences of my revenge campaign were more satisfying. Within a week, Nolan Garrett had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into his conduct with clients. Sarah had been quietly reassigned from several high-profile cases, and rumors were circulating through the legal community about her personal difficulties. But the victory felt hollow when measured against the cost. I was living alone in a house that felt like a mausoleum, estranged from my daughters, and facing a divorce that was likely to be both expensive and ugly. It was Rick Martinez who finally forced me to confront the reality of my situation. You're destroying yourself, he said over beers at Murphy's Tavern, the dive bar where we'd been drinking together since our 20s. You've hurt Sarah, you've hurt her boyfriend. You've made your point. But now you're hurting your kids. And that's where I draw the line. My kids hate me because their mother has been filling their heads with lies. Your kids hate you because you've become someone they don't recognize. Dave, I've known you for 30 years. You're not a vindictive guy. You're not someone who destroys people for sport, but that's what you've become. I wanted to argue with him, to defend my actions, but deep down I knew he was right. Somewhere along the way, my quest for justice had turned into something uglier. I'd become the villain in my own story. So what do you suggest I do? Just let Sarah get away with it? Let her rewrite history and make me the bad guy? I suggest you remember what's really important. Your daughters, your future, your own self-respect. That night, I sat at my empty house and took a hard look at what I'd become. The man who had made dinner for his cheating wife on their anniversary, who had tried to handle the divorce with dignity and discretion, was gone. In his place was someone I barely recognized. Bitter, vengeful, consumed with the need to make others pay for their sins. I thought about calling Sarah, trying to find some way to de-escalate the situation, maybe even attempting to rebuild some kind of relationship with my daughters, but before I could pick up the phone, it rang. Dave? It's Jennifer Walsh. I was surprised to hear from Jennifer. After the disaster at her barbecue, I'd assumed that friendship was over. Hi, Jen. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Dave, I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how you're going to react. But I think you deserve to know. Okay. It's about Sarah and Nolan. They're back together. She moved in with him last week. The news hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything that had happened, despite the divorce proceedings and the restraining order and the public humiliation, part of me had believed that Sarah would come to her senses, that she would realize what she'd thrown away and try to make amends. Dave? Are you there? Yeah, I'm here. Thanks for telling me. There's more. They're planning to get married as soon as your divorce is final. Sarah's been telling people that you were a controlling and toxic husband, that she's finally free to be with the man she really loves. I closed my eyes, feeling the last of my illusions crumble. Sarah hadn't just cheated on me, she'd replaced me. Everything we'd built together, all the years of marriage and partnership and shared dreams, had been discarded in favor of a relationship with a man she'd known for less than a year. Dave, I'm sorry. I know this is hard to hear, but I thought you should know what people are saying. What are people saying? That Sarah's the victim of a toxic marriage. That you controlled her, isolated her from her friends, made her feel trapped. That her affair was just her way of escaping. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed through my empty house. And people believe that? Some do. Sarah can be very convincing when she wants to be. After I hung up with Jennifer, I poured myself a drink and sat down to think. Sarah had outmaneuvered me completely. While I'd been focused on revenge, she'd been focused on rehabilitation. She'd turned herself into the victim and me into the villain, and she'd done it so skillfully that even some of our mutual friends believed her version of events. But as I sat there in the dark, nursing my bourbon and my wounded pride, an idea began to form. Sarah thought she'd won, thought she'd successfully rewritten our history and escaped the consequences of her actions. She was about to discover that she'd underestimated her husband one last time. I spent the next 3 days planning my final move. It had to be perfect, dramatic enough to make an impact, public enough to reach everyone who mattered, but legal enough to avoid criminal charges. Most importantly, it had to be true. I was done with lies and half-truths and carefully crafted narratives. The opportunity came at the annual Lawyers Association charity auction, a black tie event that drew every legal professional in the city. Sarah would be there. She never missed a chance to network and show off, and so would everyone else whose opinion mattered in our social circle. I bought a ticket, rented a tuxedo, and prepared to make one final statement.